Hello, welcome back to Art 305, Chapter 1, Why Visual Literacy? Why indeed? Let's find out. First, of course, we're going to look at my two boyfriends, Kirk and Spock. And then we're actually going to look at something more serious. In April 2003 in Iraq, US soldiers and Iraqis toppled a statue of Saddam Hussein in Firdos Square. Why topple a statue? Well, because a statue can be an effigy, and an effigy is something that's usually a roughly made model or an actual model of a particular person, made in order to be damaged or destroyed as a form of protest or a show of anger. And so the statue is toppled in effigy of a ruler that was no longer in power. But you have to look at the manipulation of the entire scene. And if you lived in Iraq, you might not gather someplace where something political was occurring during a time of unrest. And so as you can see in this portion here, this photograph is staged to show the masses of people, but a much smaller group of people than is implied with this photograph, grouped here to watch the statue go down. So in art and mass media, in this text, you could say that this photograph is framed and taken in such a way to imply something that may or may not have been completely clear if you look at this photograph. So you always have to keep in mind images are subject to constant manipulation, whether they're videos or photographs or even paintings. So you really have to think of the entire picture. And in a television-dominated society, you must develop an ability to create your own context for a constant flow of images that will come in, how to read them, so to speak. And images and meanings are never fixed. If you look at the study of semiotics by a professor named Ferdinand de Saussure, sometimes it's called Saussurean theory, he looks at a system of signs, the signified and the signifier. So the signified is the object or thing you're trying to describe, and a signifier is the word used to describe it. And we'll go back to that. Bell Hooks was a historian that became a historian or a cultural critic talking about the time in which she lives in, current popular culture. Because she said to be an informed witness to your own life, you have to be able to look at the visual signals all around you and interpret them. So why constantly look back at history if you can look at your own time? There's plenty of things going on right now. She recently got in a little bit of, not trouble, but she got criticized for criticizing Beyonce. And she said at a Black Women's Caucus that perhaps Beyonce was not the most positive stereotype. Please watch video 1 in your links, and then we can talk about what she said. But as you can see from the presenter who's showing you the video, it's already biased in Beyonce's favor. As a matter of fact, the presenter is saying, who is this Bell Hooks and how dare she question Beyonce, which is interesting because she was at a convention discussing Black women's lives. And so the idea that the mere thought of criticizing a celebrity or an icon is something that you cannot do is interesting when you look at cultural critique in your own time. So the goal of art and mass media is visual literacy in your own time. So the process of looking and how to escape the flow state. So have you ever sat down and said, I have something really important to do, I have to study for a test, but I'm just going to flake out and go on Facebook for like 10 minutes. And 3 hours goes by, very relaxing, and you're just flipping through. This is flow state. It's a very relaxing state to be in. You're also very susceptible to messages coming in. This is why a lot of people find shopping very relaxing. Just the kind of zone out flipping through of objects, and then it's very relaxing in a way. So that's flow state. So how do you wake up and break out of flow state? And how do you see what's considered the real world? So Glaisier and Mettendier wrote in 1912, the visual world only becomes the real world through the operation of thought. Okay, well, what does that mean? What they're saying is the difference between when you see a concert really, really far away, you have bad seats. So you're basically watching the concert through the video screen. So even though you're there, it's like you're not there. And I've done this before, where you're so far back, you end up kind of watching TV and you're emotionally disconnected from what's happening, or being in the fourth row and really experiencing the situation in a visceral way. So it's a version of flow state, this kind of disconnect between what's really happening and what you're seeing with your own eyes. You may be there, but you're not there. So then there's the question of how do you see? How do you see it all? And in the process of looking, you look at seeing as a biological process. You see, but it's also a learned one. So if you didn't grow up on a farm, your parents begin to show you images of pigs, usually cartoon pigs, and they're adorable. Unless you get to actual pigs. A pig is a large creature that doesn't say oink oink. It exists. And so this mental concept of pig is based on a combination of word and image. There is no natural connection between the word pig and the creature that it is. It's culturally determined. It's not natural. This is a signified and signifier connection that is arbitrarily put onto something. So the cute image does not mesh with the dirty four-legged animal that you might actually see, which is why food creators show you an anthropomorphized version of pigs and chickens, the Foster Farms chickens, so helpfully offering themselves up to be eaten, because you have this kind of cartoonish, away from the reality of the creature image of an animal. It's much easier to deny the fact that they go to the slaughterhouse and you eat them. And then there's other pigs. There's piggies, like your toes, tossing around the old pigskin of football. Chauvinist pigs, some people call police officers pigs, don't do that. And female chauvinist pigs. Actually, this is a great book about the rise of raunch culture, very interesting. So the word can have multiple meanings. So what? So who cares how we learn concepts? What does it matter? It's important because if you think about the chubby image of a pig that you learned as a child, you also learn big concepts about family and right and wrong in the same way. Culture and images feed your knowledge of the world and others around you. Advertising images teach you how things ought to look and what you ought to buy. American values abound, and we're in the book looking specifically at Kodak images. Photography is invented earlier than you would think, 1830s. So these Kodak images encouraging people to buy a camera are very old, and they're very consistent. They show you an idealized American family. But what you usually see is, and please watch videos 2, 3, and 4 in your Canvas cube for this week. Everybody's always smiling. Everybody's dressed like they're going to a party. There are parades going up and down your neighborhood. There's a mother and a father and 2 children, and everybody's deliriously happy and doing quite well. Which is not to say that that's bad, but it's also interesting to see what is not there. What is not there is anyone else. No single father, single mother, no racial diversity, nobody with handicap situations. That's it. It's the typical family becomes the only family. So it's interesting to note. And again, I'm not saying that these are bad images. I'm saying you have to just put that away in your mind. So again, we are studying the process of looking and the visual process of learning to be, quote, ourselves. So the portrayal of men and women in today's ads is interesting. So in this one, the Snickers one, you're not you when you're hungry, meaning that if you were you, you could undo that bra in about 2 seconds. And this one, Kid Rock gets lucky. I don't know very much about Kid Rock, but it's this interesting concept of multiple interchangeable women for one man. And oh, Arby's, shame on you. And this is a great one. He said, my teeth are so good, I can be his receptionist when I grow up. Not necessary, and this is older, this is from the 70s, but not the most empowering thing I've ever heard. And here's one from Mr. Klein recently. This Mother's Day, get back to the job that really matters. And see, it's the mother and her daughter learning how to wash the windows. It's a little bit gendered. And here is a weird one. This is a Pepsi commercial, a Pepsi ad that really bothered people, because here you have a little boy exchanging a Pepsi in exchange for the lifeguard uniform so he can do CPR on this magnificently endowed woman. The problem here is the little boy looks, he's like 9 or 10-ish. It's a little uncomfortable. So look at video 5, because I'm going to turn the tables on you. There's also plenty of sexism against men. There's this thing called the dumb dad trope. So look at it and you'll see it's very, very common. Culture creates icons. So Hans Melming, in the diptych of Martin van Leeuwenhoek from 1487, it's actually about many things, and obviously it's about Mary holding her infant son Jesus, and this is usually the person who commissioned the artwork, so looking into a holy scene. But this is also about the love of technology. There's stained glass in the background, which would have been a brand new technology. There's hothouse fruit, this little fruit being offered to Jesus. There's embroidery and jeweled costumes. There's a convex mirror in the background and glass in every window here. He's holding a printed book with golden pages, and he's wearing, beautiful clothing. So this is about, as much as it is about biblical times, it's about the new and technology. And so Western values are also expressed when you look at magazine covers and the Prima Porta Augustus statue. Here, sculpture, excuse me. Here, President Bush is shown from a is photographed from a lower angle so that he looks more heroic. And here he is shown lecturing, and he's got his hand up forcefully, and you notice the wedding ring on his finger and his American flag lapel pin. He's wearing a very expensive suit, and taking up most of the image is this giant crucifix behind him, right? So it says a lot. He's a well-off married man speaking to the masses, and he's Christian, just as much as this ancient Roman sculpture shows Augustus's power, his youth, his strength, the fact that he's speaking to others, and the fact that he's descended from Venus. And all of these things are expressed silently. You read them with your eyes. So, how do you destroy icons? When the Spaniards conquered the Aztecs and destroyed their religious system in the 16th century, they physically and emotionally disempowered their culture. So they compelled the Aztecs to conform to European cultural conventions, and to do so, they destroyed their older sculptures and their buildings. So you have to tear down the old to create the new. And so this is a bipolar opposition of civilized and primitive. The civilized must tame the primitive. Then there's bipolar opposition. Think of two poles of the earth, the north and the south, complete opposites. So good, evil, man, woman, strong, weak, culture, primitive. And so bipolar opposition and male-female usually places the males as big, virile, stoic, meaning, serious. Women are emotional, tinier, weaker. Um, so what does it mean to be a real man or a real woman? Aggressive traits are sometimes very much valued in males, and unfortunately, this is a skateboarding company, and sometimes this can be parodied to a level that's shocking. That he's shooting her because she's a bitch, something. So in the postmodern period, bipolar oppositions are challenged. So there's no longer strong, weak, male, female, one, many. A lot of gender roles are starting to be broken apart. Fairy tales that reinforce gender roles are sort of being rethought, especially in recent Disney movies. And you should look at the video number 8. But commercials from the 1990s and onward show that, especially in toy stores, you can really see the gender bifurcation, because we were all bifurcated when we were in the womb. You start splitting and you have 2 eyes and 2 nostrils and 2 ears, right? Split in 2. So here you can really see the difference, the electric pink of the girls section and the blue of the boys. And here are some examples. So the girl dreams of a wardrobe or a beautiful closet, and the boy dreams of outer space. The girl wants to dress up, play with puppies and kittens, play with dolls, unicorns, and the boys want to be in castles, build things, and play with cars, which is not outrageous. I have a little boy and he wants to build things and play with cars. But here you have, this is hilarious, the boy's laptop is $12.99, but the girl's laptop has half as many functions as the boy's. So it's only $9.99, but it's pink, right? And again, boys with battle axes and guns and building and music, and girls making cakes and being groovy, right? And here, this is kind of funny. She's getting the laundry out, and he's sort of hanging out by the phone. And again, another little boy on the phone, and she's getting the laundry out again. These are 2 separate commercials or advertisements. So it's interesting to note. Did Jacques-Louis David want to make the perfect painting to show the difference between men and women in 1784? No, and if you've ever been in an art history class, you've heard this painting analyzed, because it's very good, and David is a genius. This is actually about the oath of the Horatii. The Horatius brothers are going to guard Rome against the Curacious brothers, who are going to fight for Alba Longa. So instead of having 2 cities fight, 3 volunteers from 2 noble families are going to fight winner take all. And the women, of course, are sad because one of the sisters is engaged to one of the Curacious brothers, and Rome wins. So this is about nationalism and strength and honor, but it's also been analyzed by feminist scholars as showing very clearly that men are strong and upright. You see their arms are straight and lifted, as straight as the swords, and their legs are stiff and muscular, and they wear primary colors, and they are serious, whereas women are languid and emotional and overcome with weeping and sadness. They wear pastel colors. So again, this isn't what David set out to convey, but it is what, looking at this painting, you can take away if you wish, because a lot of later scholarship takes a new look at older works of art to try and dig extra meaning out of them. And then there's this really funny trend that I noticed in 50s and 60s movies, television, and even comic books: spanking. Superman spanked Lois, Batman spanked Desi, spanked Lucy, and John Wayne spanked poor Maureen O'Hara more times than I can number. And then these charming, look at this charming fellow, talking about should women be spanked? And mostly it's yes if they're being spoiled brats. So there was this interesting kind of the man was the adult and the woman was an unruly child attitude that was kind of cutesy to show in the 50s and 60s. It's an interesting thing to look back upon. Then there's the Bechdel test. So the Bechdel test, and you should watch video number 10 to see a longer description of it, asks a question of movies. Does a movie have at least two named women in it who talk to each other about something besides a man? And most movies fail this test. So it's interesting to look at the agency that women are given in narrative film. Who is the hero, who is not, and if there is a heroic figure usually being talked about even when you're off screen. So it's interesting. Then there's how you learn how to be a man. So how are real men, and this is in quotes, portrayed, and how do you learn about how to be a man through movies and television? Then there are cultural icons, and what is an icon to one culture? Michelangelo's David, so familiar to us, right? And lampooned in plenty of advertising. Can be something like Coatlicue, where you look at it and it's completely alien, but it would have been as emblematic as David in its own culture. So it really depends on taking something out of its context and placing it elsewhere, and that determines its meaning and its cultural power. See? So which seems more heroic? Depends on which culture you're in. So that was a quick and dirty lecture about Chapter 1. I hope that this was illuminating, and I will see you in your Chapter 2 lecture. Thanks a million.